So we've been talking about how to lead yourself well, and then all of a sudden you've got people in your living room and you're forced to face this question of, how do I lead my group well? I'm in Heather Zempel's living room, and I just wanted to ask her a few questions about what it means to practice hospitality in a practical way. So a lot of times we think of hospitality as having the chairs set up or having a clean house, but there's an element to hospitality that creates an open and free environment for change and growth to happen. So Heather, would you tell us a little bit about just how to do that practically when it comes to small group leadership?
I think a lot of times we think about hospitality in terms of like teacups and doilies and well-set tables. And maybe that comes from my Southern upbringing, but one of the things that I've seen biblically is that has very little to do with biblical hospitality. That in scriptures, hospitality is really about creating a safe place to hear a dangerous message. And so that's what we're trying to do every week as people come into our homes or into our workplaces, wherever we have our group. It's about creating a safe environment for a dangerous message to be heard. So there's certainly environmental factors involved in that. I mean, making sure that you've got chairs set up in a way that are comfortable for people to sit in, making sure, the temperature is right. Food is probably going to be a part of that. But there are other factors that help us create community that is life-giving and transformational. And actually food would be one of the big ones. Do you have to have food to have a good discussion about 1 Corinthians 12? Maybe not, but it certainly can't hurt. And what I've found is that sometimes having food makes the content of the group a lot more palatable. And this doesn't have to be a difficult thing. I mean, you can have different people assigned to be in charge of the food component. You can theme it. You can have different people bring different things different nights. But food, there's something about food that brings people together and creates community. I think another thing that helps to build community group is to play together. I've found that 1 hour of play often helps me get to know somebody than 12 weeks of conversation. And so finding a way to make sure that your group life incorporates some times where you're just playing together and having fun together and sharing life together. I think serving together serves a very similar purpose. When you're in the trenches with another person and you're kind of shoulder to shoulder with them, then there's a type of community that gets built by that that's different from but complementary to when you do the face-to-face thing. And so I would say to build community in your group, find a way to serve together, because I think that groups that serve together are going to live in community together better. And then the final thing I would say is to build community, pray together. And I would just encourage groups I think a lot of times, and I do this, I'm bad about this, I'll make prayer kind of the add-on to the group, or this is how we cap off the night. But if prayer could be a central focus of the group experience, so often in Acts we read that the early church was in unity, or they were in one accord, is what one translation reads. And it's interesting that usually that precedes or follows times of prayer. And so prayer can really bring your group together. And so finding creative ways to make prayer and bringing your group into the presence of God a central component of group life. And sometimes that might mean bringing prayer to the front end of your group time, incorporating it into the middle, or just making sure that prayer saturates the everyday walking around lives Monday to Friday of your group experience and pulling people together in that way. So there are a lot of ways to build community. It's something that I think the leader has to set the tone for, be proactive about. And I really think it's about eating together, praying together, playing together, and serving together.
All right, that's great. I mean, that's very proactive, all things that you can do to create community. But then what about the times when you find yourself reacting to things, like a mess happens in somebody's life, and you find yourself in a pastoral role and you realize, I'm a small group leader. I didn't necessarily sign up to be a mini pastor, and not everybody's prepared to handle that or know what pastoral care is. So what would you recommend for them in those situations?
All right, you just used the word pastor in pastoral care, and that is really scary. I know I've got the word pastor in my title, and that scares me. But you're right that when we step into a role of small group leadership, we're essentially taking on a pastoral role. And so I think maybe we need to have a better understanding of what that means. And I think the word care is really the key word there. The word pastor actually comes from the idea of shepherding, that your role is to shepherd the group. It's not to have all the right answers. It's not to fix things. It's not to make things better, make things right, or have the perfect, profound thing to say at the right moment. It's just caring for people. And I think one of the ways we do that is by waiting for the defining moments to happen. And I think defining moments happen in the lives of all of our group members at different times. It can be changing circumstances. It can be major life decisions. Those moments that become very raw in a person's life, and often it's related to mess. I mean, if we're honest, community just gets very messy. And sometimes that mess happens within the context of the group. And sometimes it happens just because life is messy, and life mess happens and people bring that into the context of the group. And so our role in that moment is to care. It's to be present. I think it's to be present, to be prayerful. I think that a lot of times when we navigate mess and people are facing those defining moments, defining decisions, defining messes, it's about being present in their life. It's not about having the right thing to say at the right time or having all the answers or being able to give good counsel. It's just being present and bringing the presence of Christ into that situation. And then I think being prayerful is another key component. Are you praying for the people in your group? And I really believe that when God entrusts a group of people to you, He will give you discernment and wisdom and knowledge that goes beyond your human ability and capacities about the people that you're leading. And as you pray for them, you're able to love them in a new way and love them the way Christ loves them. And you're able to kind of capture a piece of God's heart for that person and for that situation. So I really believe that our role as group leaders is pastoral. It's about caring for people. It's about being present and being prayerful in the midst of the mess.
So basically, leaders should be using those opportunities for pastoral care as an opportunity for growth for the group, for the person walking through that situation, and for discipleship. Talk to us a little bit about discipleship in general when it comes to the group environment.
I think the ultimate goal of any group is to make disciples. I mean, we want to have fun together. We want to grow in community. We need to care for people in those defining moments. But the ultimate goal is to make disciples, and not just make disciples, but make disciples who are disciple makers. The only way we know if we've been successful in disciple making is if we are reproducing ourselves. So I think the first step in that is making sure that the people in your group don't view themselves as group participants, but group owners, that they have a role that is unique to them that they play in the group. And so anything from somebody that's in charge of the food every night. Maybe you put somebody that's in charge of kind of the prayer time, the prayer requests, how you navigate prayer through the week, or someone that can help figure out how we're going to create community, how we're going to play together, how we're going to have fun together, how we're going to serve together. It's not about you delegating away the things you don't want to do, but finding people who have gifts and abilities and passions in those areas that can not only help build community, provide care, and make disciples within the group, but they also feel like they have a role to play and they own the group vision and they own what's happening in the group. And then ultimately that you would find people that you begin to put in place to do what you do, to lead the discussion, to ask the questions, to cultivate the community that's happening in the group and the learning that is going on in the midst of that, because that is the ultimate goal. Eventually you want someone from your group to step up and either take part of your group and form a new group so that we have plenty of opportunities for other NCCers to find community, to be cared for, and to be cultivated into disciples. Or that they would take one of their own gifts and passions and abilities and go off and start their own group that's based on that. Because the ultimate goal is that we make disciples who make disciples who make disciples.
So, I mean, I think the heart of this really is people over content. So much when we lead groups, we think it's about, going through a material or accomplishing an agenda, but really it's more about focusing and making that community. It's about caring for people through difficult situations, and it's about discipling them. In 1 Corinthians, Paul talks about follow me as I follow Christ, and how this idea of discipleship is just so inherent to his leadership and the way that he leads people. And that's really what we're trying to do in small groups. And that doesn't mean that you have to have all the answers, but it does mean that you need to just steward the people that God brings in your door and steward the lessons that he's given you to lead others.